Our meeting is recorded by video and audio in accordance with the state open meeting law. And the first order of business is the flag salute and a moment of silence. I'm going to take executive privilege here, and I will lead the flag salute because it is my birthday. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, for liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Madam Clerk, would you call the first order of business?
First order of business is oral communications.
The public shall have the opportunity at every regularly scheduled meeting to be heard under oral communications on matters not appearing on the agenda. Oral communication shall allow any resident who has a request or complaint of any nature relative to city business to appear before the council, state their problem without debate, and the matter shall be referred to the proper agency through the office of the mayor. The resident will be notified within a 2-week period relative to the disposition of same, and a copy shall be forwarded to the City Council. Persons speaking under oral communication shall be limited to 3 minutes each. The Council President shall not allow complaints as to individual performance. So is there anyone who wishes to speak under oral communications? Councilor Orlando, welcome. For the record, your name and address, but welcome.
Joe Orlando, 6 Angle Street. Thank you for allowing me a few minutes of your time. I'd like to first start by thanking the council for taking up the affordable housing thing I came here a few months ago to address. My understanding is that progress has been made. I appreciate that. I've reported that back to the constituents who came and talked to me, who I then told to talk to you, who then came back to me and said, well, you did this, so it's on you now. So I'm trying to follow up. I want to thank you for doing that. I do have one comment for some feedback. Some folks are concerned about the building department being both the enforcement arm and the administrator for deciding whether or not their prima facie evidence has been made for the ZBA hearing, so they're a little hesitant to come forward. At the time we discussed it originally, we talked about a separate person under the ZBA being that. It's sort of a small point, but I think it might be beneficial to think about maybe somebody else within the administration becoming that person tasked with reviewing the evidence before the ZBA. The other issue I came to talk to you about tonight is a sidewalk. So my family owns the building at 1 Western Avenue on the corner of Angle and Western. I now own the house at 6 Angle Street, which is immediately behind it. And there's no sidewalk on that side of the street. So if you are to walk down Western Avenue towards Main Street from the boulevard, you get to the corner of our building, and the crosswalk to cross Angle Street actually starts before the end of my building, our building. So people start crossing a crosswalk, and then cars come kind of around the corner, and they can't see around the building because there's really no proper walkway that comes out around the corner. That's one of the issues. It's pretty dangerous. And I've seen a few issues there more recently as cars get further and further along the sidewalk, and the sidewalk gets tamped down further and further, the curb. So I wanted to bring that to your attention as well. And I'm also here because my children are 4 and 2. And you step out of my front door, you step right onto about the busiest street in the community. Previously, I understand the city had some plan, at least a working plan, to address that side of the street and the sidewalk, which especially during festivals like Fiesta becomes a big walking path for folks. But it's a pretty significant public safety issue, and I was hoping that the council could have some discussion on it and perhaps send it to the Traffic Commission for review or something to that nature to get a discussion going about a sidewalk from Western Avenue and Angle up to Middle and Angle on the Orlando Associates 6 Angle and V&A side. So that's the reason I came. I appreciate your time, and if I can be of any assistance, let me know.
Thank you, Joe. Anyone else for oral communication? Madam Clerk, next order of business.
Next order of business is a presentation from Michelle Rogers and Brad Dorr of Dorr and Whittier Architects regarding the East Gloucester School project.
Thank you very much. Brad and Michelle, welcome to City Council, and we appreciate your coming and giving us this briefing. Go ahead, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much for having us tonight. My name is Brad Dorr. I'm a principal with Dorr & Whittier Architects. We're happy to say that, we've been retained by the city to go and take a look at your East Gloucester project. We were fortunate enough to have worked with you previously on the West Parish School, and we actively are doing some other things for the city as well. So tonight what I'd like to do is we're going to give you a little bit of an update, a little bit of an overview of the process that we're going through with respect to the East Gloucester School project. The team that we have, the team really here is a partnership between you, the City of Gloucester, the MSBA, which is the Massachusetts School Building Authority, and then your project team, where we are acting as the designer, and then you also have an owner's project manager being represented by CBRE Heary. So one of the things that I just want to impart on you all tonight is the fact that there really is a very defined process, and we're really just at the beginning of that process. And having done a number of these projects around the Commonwealth, I think one of the things that we've come to recognize is, as a project starts to go and work its way forward, people have a sense of, are they being involved? Has this thing gone and started to take on its own life, and nobody knows what's going on? So I just want everybody to understand that right now we're at the very, very early stages of that. We haven't made any decisions. We have a process that we're going to have to go through with the state, which is very formal through the MSBA. So I just wanted to get that out there. No decisions have been made, and it's ultimately devised and defined by the MSBA to be a very transparent process. So one of the probably most important takeaways from this slide, in terms of the project team that we have here, is that MSBA is a significant partner in the process. They actually are your reimbursement or your state funding agency for this project. And depending upon where it all shakes out, they could be, I think with West Parish, I think you ended up receiving somewhere around 48 to 50%, reimbursement for that project. So it's a significant amount of funding, that they're actually participating in with you as the city. So hence, the formality of the process. So what I'd like to do is I'd actually like to turn this over to Michelle Rogers, who is our architect within our firm and is the project manager for this. She's going to go through a little bit about what we've done, what some of the next steps are, and what some of the goals are of this project, and then we'd be happy to go and entertain any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Good evening. Good evening. Can you hear me? So let's go. Why are we here? We're here actually to identify the educational facility needs for your district and determine whether or not your buildings are suiting those needs. We're looking at both the East Gloucester School as well as the Veterans School. So we're combining both of those because the MSBA said, go ahead, go take a look at that. Both schools, you can look at one school or you can look at two different enrollments, and we'll get into that in just a moment. From those assessments, after we've identified the educational needs and the building's needs, then we develop options to resolve those needs. We have several options that we look at, and I'm going to show you. Right now, just as a narrative, we're looking at 10 different possible options. And that's just because the MSBA has given us 2 enrollments and you've given us 3 sites. So we'll talk about that in just a moment. All of that comes out to 10 different options. So our goals. Our first thing to do is to understand your goals and what your needs are. Some of those needs are the overcrowding of both schools, looking at outdated facilities, looking at the lack of technology that helps you move forward into the 21st century learning, looking at your failing facilities. And these include systems that have been in place for a long time. They're getting more and more difficult to repair, they're getting more and more expensive to operate, and they're beyond their useful life in many cases. We're going to develop options. Those options that we talked about are going to be looking at just the East Gloucester School only, that kind of enrollment. We're looking at a combination of the East Gloucester School and the Veterans School. We'll talk about why we're looking at that in just a moment. We're looking at your different sites, the sites that the city has given us to take a look at, new sites that might be out there. And then we have to look, per the MSBA, at addition and renovations and capital improvements only. It's part of what the part of the study that they require us to do, so that you have baselines for for each of the projects moving forward. Once we look at all of those options and compare their costs and how they compare to the educational program and how that value comes back to the city, then we pick a solution. So we're not picking solutions today, tomorrow. In fact, I'm going to show you a timeline that we're not picking solutions for a few more months before we even begin to identify what those solutions are, and we get into a preferred solution towards the end of next year. So just touching base on bringing you back up to date, I think some of you remember this slide from a few years back when we had done your school assessments. This is just one way of measuring the overcrowding. It's taking the entire building and looking at this gross square footage that you have and the number of students that you have and comparing that to what the MSBA uses as their guideline for square footage. So right now, the existing, on your left-hand side of that slide is the East Gloucester School, and on the right is the Veterans School. You can see they're about the same size, within a few thousand square feet of each other. The existing East Gloucester School, currently, if you were to use the MSBA guidelines, would house 149 students if you used every inch of that building per the MSBA guidelines. You currently have 210 students in that school. Our previous projections indicated that you would have 245, and your previous ones were 236. Your current projections are looking at 245 students in that school. The MSBA has given you 230 as their long-range projections. So you can see right now that there's no way that that building could serve that many students. If you had 210 students, the MSBA would be looking somewhere between 37 to 42,000 square feet for a building for 210 students. Similar situation is happening over at Veterans School, and that school could house currently 175 students if you were to look at the square footage for those students. And your previous projections for that school were 208, and your current enrollment is 217. So that's just one way of measuring how a school is fitting the number of students that you have in it. It's a big picture, it's pretty broad. One of the other ways that we like to measure a school is how it's actually functioning with classrooms. So we use this method. It's a red, green, yellow kind of stop sign thing. If it's red, it's undersized. If it's green, it's oversized. And if it's yellow, it's just about right size. Yellow is where you want to be. MSBA wants you to be within the yellow so that you're not building too big a space. But you can see the only yellow on this slide is actually in the modular classroom, which the MSBA doesn't count as square footage. The green on the lower right-hand side there, that's your cafeteria, but it also serves as your gym. It's green because we looked at it as a cafeteria. If we were to look at it as a gym, it would be half the size of what the MSBA would require for the kinds of physical education that you would deliver in an elementary school. Other things here that don't show up is what you don't have in this building. You don't have an art room, you don't have a music room, you don't have a lot of special education space, and you actually have an administration space that it's about 20% of what the MSBA guidelines would suggest that you would need for this number of students. And you can see in the picture on the lower side there that there's students doing work in the hallway. This is one of the things that you try to avoid when you're looking in elementary schools, pulling students out to do work in spaces that are not really meant for teaching. This is happening at both schools. If we look at the Veterans School, they're doing special physical therapy in the hallway here. You have a little bit more yellow in this scenario, but again, a lot of red. And again, the same situation with the multipurpose room, which serves as a cafeteria, auditorium, and gymnasium. And again, about 50% undersized for physical education space. We do have a music room in this building, but we don't have an art room, so art is delivered on the cart, which limits the kinds of programs that you can offer for elementary school art. Again, one way that we're looking at buildings, how are they meeting your educational needs? The second thing that we do is we go out with our consultants and we look at the building's facilities. So we're looking at the structural, the architectural elements, the mechanical, electrical, plumbing, fire protection, life safety, security, technology, kitchen facilities. We measure and look at everything. And a couple of things that we do look at as well is the code compliance. That's based on current code. and the functional use of the building, and accessibility. So when we talk about renovations to a building, there's some code triggers that you have to be aware of. So if somebody were to say, go renovate that building inside to out, you then are going to trigger several different codes. And the big ones are structural. Oh, here we go. Structural, where you would have to upgrade the entire structure of the building to meet current code. They would view that as a new building because you would be triggering more than 50% renovation of that building. Life safety, that would be fire alarms and fire protection. East Gloucester right now does not have a fire suppression system. That would be sprinklers throughout the building. So all of that would have to be incorporated. And of course, accessibility. And this is a big one. As soon as you hit a certain amount of dollars within the building, you then have to start upgrading your accessibility. And it comes in different waves. In the East Gloucester building, we have issues where there's non-accessible parking, non-accessible entrance, non-accessible bathrooms. We have several ramps, doors, a lot of accessibility issues within this building. And all of those would be triggered by even the smallest amount of renovations within this building. So what are our potential options? I had mentioned that the MSBA requires that we look at capital improvements only. They require that we look at renovations to the existing building. They require that we look at additions and renovations. So that would be an addition to suit whatever the design enrollment would be. And then they would ask us to look at new construction, either on the existing footprint or within the site. And we would have to do that for each of the design enrollments that they've given us. And you can see here that the MSBA has given us 2 design enrollments. That would be 230 students for the East Gloucester School only, or 440 if you were to combine East Gloucester and veteran students in the same building. So for the East Gloucester site, we'd have to look at all of those options. If we were to look at the veteran site, we would have to look at only the ones for 440 students. So that would be additions and renovations to house 440 students and new construction for 440 students. And then there's new construction on other sites. And right now we only have one other site that's been given to us to look at, and that is the Green Street site, which is also off of Schoolhouse Road. So it's the field that combines those, is in between those two, and I will show you that. So if we were to look at the Green Street site, we would also have to do both design enrollments, 230 students as well as 440. So you can see we have a large array of options that are just mandatory for us to look at. And then within each of those, there's probably going to be several iterations. We'll probably have several additions and renovations for each of the schools. We'll probably have several different new construction options to look at within each of those. Once we begin to talk about sites, we're beginning to assess our opportunities and constraints on each of these sites. This is the East Gloucester site, which is about 5.5 acres, I think. And you can see it has some wetlands on it and the school building footprint, as well as, I don't know if you can see it from there, but there's a lot of topography. As the lines get closer, the hill gets steeper, and further to the left, and then further over here to the right. The building that you see there, the new school, would be approximately 1.5 times that size for 230 students and about 2 times that size for 440 students. So that's what we would have to be looking at for that site. On the Veterans Memorial site, again, similar size buildings, so again, similar size. Oh, thank you. Oh, I have one. Similar size comparison, about 1.5 times the size of that building for 230 students, but we're not looking at that option on this site. We'd only be looking at 440, so about twice the size of that building. We also know that we have some constraints on that side, and that would be the ball field that's existing there. And then the other site that we're looking at is the Green Street site. This site is about 18 to 20 acres right now is what we're looking at. And the opportunities that we're looking at here would be accessing from Gloucester Crossing Road into that site and the potential for putting a school on that site. But again, we don't know where we're going and we don't have a lot of information on this site just yet. So some of the work that we've done to date. We've done an updated space summary program. That tells us it's like if you were to think about if you were cooking, the set of instructions that you would have for cooking. This is the space summary that the MSBA gives us that tells us how large each room is and how many of those we get. We're looking at the educational guiding principles. This would be guidelines for us as far as when we begin to design our buildings. What are we designing for? Those principles have been developed with the leadership group, including the superintendent and the principals from both elementary schools. We started looking at initial building diagrams, optimizing the relationship between different spaces. We've begun to identify site constraints, opportunities. Topography is definitely a site constraint. Access to sites, definitely a site constraint, but different opportunities that we might have on each of those sites. We've looked at sustainability objectives, and the MSBA will give you 2 extra percentage points if you meet certain sustainability goals. So we're looking at those goals and meeting those goals. If you remember, West Parish actually received LEED Gold back when we did that, so you certainly got those percentage points when we did that school. We're conducting the existing conditions investigations, which I just brought you through, and we've held several public meetings to date, including meeting with the PTO of both elementary schools. Our next steps are to gather more information about our sites, look at traffic designs and patterns, begin testing the soils and doing site tests of buildings, those buildings that are about 1.5 to 2 times the size of those existing building footprints. How would that actually work on the site? How would parking work? How would drop-offs work? How would a bus turnaround work? Where would playgrounds go? Where do the students enter and exit from the site? And how do you divide the building up in such a way that you can provide public access to things like the gymnasium, cafeteria, and the stage, but still keep other portions of the building separate so that they're more secure. We'll be developing our MSBA submissions over the next few months, and then we'll continue to hold some of these public meetings. So overall, our schedule, our feasibility, this is where we are today. We're looking at delivering our preliminary design program, that is the PDP, when you hear us talking about that, in August. We're looking at preferred schematic report in December of this year, so towards the end of the year. Then we go into schematic design. So towards the end of this year is when we take our many options, we narrow them down to just a few, and then we pick our one. We go into schematic design, we begin to develop those options, and then we would come back to the city to look for funding and voting. We're not sure when that would happen, but that date's to be determined. So, whoops, and if all goes according to schedule, you would complete a building project around 2023. Any questions?
Great, thank you very much, Michelle. Councilors, before questions, I just wanted to recognize that Superintendent Sapphire is here. Thank you for coming, and School Committee Chairman Jonathan Pope and members Kathy Clancy and Melissa Texera. Thank you, and Prince. Thank you for coming. So if there are councilor questions either for Michelle or Brad from the architectural firm or from the school committee, you can invite them. And just one more thing, I would like to thank the school committee. You did invite us, the city council, to come last week at your meeting with this presentation, and we appreciate your offering it tonight to us. So questions, Councilor Cox?
I just have a couple questions. We're paying you $1 million for this study. What is going to be the cost if we add another location as a possible site?
So you've authorized $1 million, to go and proceed with the feasibility schematic design phase. So a portion of that is actually earmarked for Doran Whittier. A portion of that is also earmarked for your owner's project manager, and then there's also another portion of that ultimately ends up going into things like some of the testing, the geotechnical work, and a whole bunch of other allowances. With respect to looking at another site, I think what we're trying to do right now is we're trying to go at a fairly high level, start to screen some of these sites to see how feasible they are before we actually go and start spending a whole bunch of money doing nitty-gritty detail. For example, you know that we already, for anybody that knows East Gloucester, we know that that's a pretty tight site, right? There's already a school on it. You know, the topography, as Michelle said, is challenging, you know, as you're coming down towards the water. You have existing wetlands and all of those things. So we're trying to narrow that down and understand, is it really feasible, or is it kind of from a cost perspective, does it make sense to go and do, you know, all of the options that MSBA is going to require us to do at that site? So we're going to try and winnow that down and say, we really think it makes sense to do this, this, and this, and get a subset based on, you know, the types of schools, you know, the sizes of the schools, whether it's consolidated or whether it's a standalone project, and then understand whether or not, you know, we have all of the proper title and deed information at Green Street. And once we have that, we'll understand, you know, do we really have one site there, 2 sites, or 3 sites? I think it's pretty straightforward when we look at it, that the veteran site, you know, to be able to go and have 440 students at that site without impinging upon the ball field is going to be a challenge. So, you know, if we're able to winnow that down to, you know, what we think it should be, I don't think there's any additional cost coming from us looking at other sites. And I'm just not aware of other sites that really are out there. I know that before we even got on board, there was a number of investigations looking at alternative sites, potentially. Unfortunately, there's just not a lot of, you know, open land that's out there that the city of Gloucester already owns. One of the other things that the MSBA talks about is the fact that they don't actually go and reimburse you for site acquisitions. So if you were able to find a suitable site, say something in the, you know, 10 to 15 acre range that might be available, and you had to acquire that, that cost would not be reimbursable by the state.
So you've not been told of another site that the city owns the entire lot of land that could fit all of our elementary schools?
No, not at this point.
Okay. Second question is, how does the MSBA feel about neighborhood pushback? I've received a lot of emails and phone calls about pushback on Green Street.
I don't know. You'd have, I really, I can't speak for the MSBA, and honestly, I'd prefer not to speak for the MSBA. You know, what the MSBA will tell you, right, is that, you know, they're in the business of creating successful projects. I think that, you know, in my personal opinion, having done a number of these projects, I think the pushback at this point has to do with not necessarily understanding what's happening there. Because if those folks that are pushing back right now do, they're ahead of us. Because we don't even know what's happening there. So I think that, you know, one of the benefits of this process is to be able to have to go through all of these steps to understand what the potential options are. And we're going to be required to do that as part of this process. If ultimately, right, you go and, you know, I'll use your Green Street example, if there's a particular reason why that site, okay, doesn't make sense as compared to the other options on the table, that will come out of that process. Ultimately, you know, from a pushback perspective, we can only identify what we think makes the most sense. Ultimately, you're the client, right? The city of Gloucester, the Gloucester School District, and you're going to define ultimately what's going to be acceptable and not acceptable to you, both on a functional, educational, and political level.
Thank you.
Councilor Holmgren.
Yes, thank you. I am wondering if you've accounted for possible increases in population if the school district becomes more desirable, if we can get more young families to move here. We are building a rather large housing development in that area, so, and it's not necessarily designated for young families, but is there flexibility to adjust for student population in years to come?
So at this point, the answer to that, unfortunately, is no. As part of the process that you started when you submitted your statement of interest with the MSBA, and you are invited into what they call the eligibility period. As part of that eligibility period, what you do is you sit down and you're, to a certain extent, negotiating what your enrollments are, but those are defined on a fairly scientific basis as to, over a 10-year period, what the expected enrollments will be. And as you can see in the slide that we had up there before, which is, when we go back, and we also did the master plan for you back in, I believe, 2014, you look at that, and they've moved a little bit, but not a whole lot over that period. We've seen one go up a little bit and one go down a little bit, but all in all, still pretty close. But that's how the MSBA process works. You're welcome.
Councilor Nolan?
A question about traffic and parking review. When you do your plans for your school, do you take into account school plays? Do you take into account meet the teacher nights, adequate parking, without restrictions for using public streets, especially public streets that don't have legal parking? It's a concern from the past, as you're aware of.
Sure am.
And I just want to make sure that that's something that we're working on in future plans that you're aware of, so it doesn't become something that we're working with now.
It's a good question. It's a question you're raising because we've had the discussion about West Parish, and ultimately it's a little bit of a balancing act that you have to, and to a certain extent a compromise that you ultimately strike in terms of what the objectives are. So parking in and of itself is a little bit more straightforward. It's just in terms of the analysis. So we know how many staff, okay, you're going to have at that school. You can make a reasonable projection from what visitors are. And so you know what your day-to-day number is going to be. Then after that, then you have to start looking at things like you point out, if you have a school play, and how many parents and how many cars, might you have for that school play. And then after that, that one actually can be pretty straightforward too, but usually it's more significant than you would have on a daily basis for your staff. So then it becomes a cost question. It becomes a cost question of how far, down do you want it to go in terms of, picking out that, design point for those relatively few events over the course of a year, and all of the additional costs that's going to be associated with that incremental parking. That's a discussion, right, that's up to you as the owner, or the school district as the owner, to say, what is that magic balance? So that's parking. That's the easier part of the two. The harder part of the two is the pickup and drop-off part, which actually we're familiar with West Parish. And, West Parish was something that, when we looked at that, we knew the site that we had to deal with. We knew the constraints that we had there. We were able to accommodate some of that, but not all of that. We looked at purchasing a house that was there at one point in time to get an additional access into that site. Again, that was driven by a cost basis. We actually looked at taking that and driving a road all the way out closer to where Concord Street and 128 meet. But again, that became a cost issue. So ultimately, we like to think that we're pretty good about being aware of the issues, and we have to sit down with you as the owner and figure out what is the right balance that we can try and strike. Because that's what it comes down to. It comes down to balancing costs off with those types of dynamics.
Thank you. I just hope the next balance is a little bit more in the favor of the people and the parents.
Other questions? Councilor Gilman, then Councilor Hecht.
Thank you, Brad and Michelle. It's nice to see you again.
You too.
Also, school committee and Dr. Sapphire, thanks for being here and for your work. So, having been through this before with West Parish, sitting on their side on the school committee, I have a couple of questions. First of all, can you tell us how competitive it was in terms of being accepted for this round of MSBA? How many schools in Massachusetts put their name in the hat, and how many were given the opportunity to move forward?
So I don't know if I know the exact numbers. Maybe Michelle or maybe Dr. Sapphire will. But you know, the process itself is very competitive, right? There's 351 communities, okay, within the Commonwealth. And as you can imagine, you know, everybody has a number of schools that are in there, and everybody's vying for that. So I think the number was, what was it?
92 applicants and 17.
So 92 applicants this year, okay, or the time that you were enrolled in your, you enrolled your statement of interest, and 17 were accepted.
So that's about 1 in 5.5 or something like that, so
That's
it's
correct.
competitive
You're
to-
good
to-
math, Val.
okay.
And the other thing to note is that I think that number that's being accepted actually has been going down somewhat just because of the number of large projects that are out there and the amount of volume that takes up in terms of the funding capacity of the MSBA. So it's a very competitive environment, and you know, you guys are happy to be there and to have the opportunity. And I guess the other thing just to note is that the process itself, you know, as I said, is very prescribed. You go through this process, you go through the various steps, and once you've selected what that option is, you know, you go through your own voting and funding mechanism, and you have the MSBA board that would go in advance and approve that. They would have to approve it actually before you approve it, actually in most circumstances. And then you have 120 days, okay, to bring your portion of the funding to the overall project. And at that point in time, if that's successful, then it's the West Parish example and you move forward. There wasn't a vote on that project, but so if you don't actually have that approved, okay, by the city, then you have to go back to the end of the line again.
Okay. A couple more questions, Mr. Chair, is that okay?
Go ahead.
So it reminded me of how we felt when we looked at the Fuller School for an opportunity for elementary, when I saw all the rooms that are not compliant with MSBA standards in both East Gloucester and Veterans. Can you explain a little bit more why MSBA says no to those types of rooms in terms of renovations, and why a building like that would have to be a complete knockdown and rebuild?
So, again, as part of this process, you have to vet that, okay, through the various options. So MSBA will go and require, right, as Michelle said, just a capital improvement, this is a little bit new, a capital improvement program to go and say, if we don't start going and knocking down walls, even though the space in those areas is below what the MSBA guidelines are, we'll still let you consider it so long as it meets your educational program objectives. So it might be undersized, as some of those slides showed you, but it would still be something that they would consider. However, you still have to go and make the building compliant with all of the code requirements that Michelle had pointed out, structural, life safety, accessibility. And so what we're going to do as part of this process is we're going to evaluate that. We're going to look at, you know, what a scenario like that might look at, what you would have to do, and what the cost associated with that would be. And then similarly, we're going to look at a renovation only to the extent that we can meet the educational program in most of these instances, because as you saw, the buildings are significantly capacity limited. We would have to put an addition on that. So we'll also look at a renovation addition. And then what we'll do is we'll be comparing this, okay, to what's going to happen is if you looked at a new construction option. And then we'll put a matrix together that will compare all of those. So there'll be pros and cons associated with those. You'll be able to look at that capital improvement as the kind of the lowest level intervention that you could have. And then we'll see what the dollars are based on, you know, what the total project cost is, what MSBA's reimbursement is going to be of the eligible costs, how your additional incentive points added up, because in some of these, it's much easier to go and get incentive points when we're talking about things like sustainability if you were building new versus if you were doing a capital improvement only project. And so then what we'll do is we'll compare all of those, we'll put those out there, everybody will have a chance to look at them, and then ultimately as part of, you know, the kind of the final bullet that was there, you'll make a selection as to what your preferred option is, and that's the one that you'll choose to move forward with and present to the MSBA for their approval.
final question is maybe one of either Jonathan or Dr. Sapphire, but my question is, where can the public find these slides tonight? I've noticed that you have a pretty nice website on the gloucesterschools.com, and I'm eager to know where these documents can be found. And I have an additional question is, I haven't had an opportunity to really look at the minutes of the building committee. Where can they be found for the public to review? I'm interested in just checking over the minutes. So those are my two questions.
Two phones in one. Thank you for the question. The school district's website has information, frequently asked questions. We're in the process of placing the minutes up on the website as well. For more illustrative information about the project, the East Gloucester Building Project is also on the website. It's a website powered by Weebly. So if you go to East Gloucester Building Project /Weebly.com, there is a host of information about the nature of these types of projects and this particular project as well.
Would you be kind enough to send to our city clerk that site so we can see, it's easy for us to find on the council? Because I'd be interested in seeing that and seeing updates to the minutes. So thank you.
Glad to do
Thank you
so,
so
and
much.
important to do so, yes.
Thanks.
Yep.
Those are my questions. Thank you, Council.
Councilor Hecht first, and then Councilor Memhard.
Thank you. And thanks for coming out. Good to see you again. I'm the Ward 2 city councilor, and so the Green Street property and the Veterans is in Ward 2. Councilor Cox is the former Ward 2 city councilor, now at large. She lives very close to the Green Street site. So we're both getting quite a bit of questioning, pushback. I know you are. So in the sequence of how something gets done and how Green Street might or might not get selected, one of the key elements of that, of course, it was formerly a subdivision. It was approved as a subdivision years ago. City took the property back. And a key element is, what does that all mean for title and survey before we even get to geotechnical? And so I don't know if you could give some sort of there's a lot of people here for the Green Street site. Sure. And probably listening in their homes right now about the Green Street site. So in terms of the next step on the Green Street site, if you could just sort of quickly outline where we are on title and survey and what that might be in terms of how this may or may not be feasible as a site.
Sure. Let me just pull up Green Street side. So, as you pointed out, there are a number of parcels within the yellow boundary area that we're talking there. I actually think, those are from the city GIS, but I think the actual parcels are significantly more than that. Correct. And so, the area that we're looking at is the boundary within the yellow. Okay. And so, so the answer to your question is, we don't have that answer yet. It's being investigated right now by the city to understand, whether or not all of the title and ownership and, in order to be proper, exists. If ultimately we found out that, there was a glitch there, we would have to go and sit back and say, is that something that can be rectified, or can the deed be perfected, or those types of things, in order to understand whether or not that area that we're talking about there is something that you could legitimately use as a school site. So that process is ongoing. And as I was saying earlier, what we're really trying to do is, go through this in kind of a rational manner, to not go out there and start popping geotechnical wells in place, just understand if the soils are all okay, if you don't, have the opportunity to actually use it because you don't own it properly. So that process is ongoing. It's something that we're working towards, and it's really it's kind of a linchpin in terms of understanding, the next step with respect to this site. If, once that process has kind of worked itself through, and, if it's a negative, then the site wouldn't be really viewed as a potential contender, because you don't have proper ownership of it. Or, maybe it's something that can be remedied. I don't know. So the lawyers are working through that right now to understand what the status of that is.
I'm sorry, do you have a time frame on that, an estimated time frame?
I don't have a firm time frame on that, but I know that they're working on it, and you know, we'll take it sooner rather than later, but there's a fair amount of research there to make that all come together.
Then in terms of the lots on the left side of your outlined area, there are electrical wires, as you're aware.
Yeah.
And are those lots excluded because of the electrical wires?
I don't think that they're excluded because of the electrical wires. I think that there's some grade issues in there as well.
An easement as well.
And an easement.
We pulled our line. You've got 20 acres.
Exactly. So that becomes it can become a bit of a natural buffer is what I'm saying.
So yeah, so what we're kind of looking at this is, you know, we're taking the easier path right now, and if we think just, you know, based on what we know, that, you know, that's probably sufficient area. We've done some initial test fits on there to try and get ourselves a little more comfortable with that. And if you know, that's all we have to use and we can make it work there, we wouldn't want to go closer.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilor Memhard.
Thank you. Michelle and Brad, thank you very much, and thank you to the East Gloucester School Building Committee for your good work on this. It's an exciting time for all of us in Ward 1 particularly, and at Veterans and East Gloucester School, to look forward to our elementary schools becoming something closer to the West Parish beautiful school within our lifetimes and our children's lifetimes and our grandchildren's lifetimes. My question would be what practical and functional flexibility we have to look at incorporating some non-city-owned parcels that are abutting in the particular case of the East Gloucester School site. There are 2 or 3, the Espresso's restaurant site to East Main Street, which would address access issues, and other adjoining parcel sites. There may be some ledge and elevation issues. But to what extent in this process are you and our committee able to incorporate some flexibility to look at acquisition of, hopefully friendly acquisition of abutting vacant land to improve and make more functional an existing neighborhood school site? Because there's clearly a lot of enthusiasm both at Veterans and in East Gloucester in the school model that we know, which is a true neighborhood school. We've made it work at East Gloucester on Davis Street Extension for a long time against incredible odds, and the opportunity to improve that site as a neighborhood school site with some tweaks and expansion would really address a lot of the community's hopes, I think.
Yeah, so that's a good question. It's one that we're actively looking at right now. We are aware of the 2 properties that are adjacent there that potentially could be considered. As I mentioned before, right, there's always you know, the additional acquisition cost. But honestly, I think the biggest challenge that we have right there is grade, right, and topography. Well, yeah, there's, you know, it's Gloucester, right, so we've got lots of rock. But I think we're chasing a lot of grade there on that site, depending on which parcel you're talking about. One's going up and one's going down. And so, you know, we're looking at, you know, some test fits there as how we might be able to accommodate that, and whether or not, you know, we think it's really feasible to even, or we should be considering, I guess, rather, you know, those additional parcels. Does it make it better? Is it something that kind of like tilts the game a little bit to go and say that we should be considering those? So we are actively looking at that. We haven't drawn any final conclusions on that yet.
It would just be my hope that we can keep, as far as we can in this process, an open view towards some flexibility, because again, it's not a city-owned parcel that we're talking about, but it greatly enhances an existing city-owned parcel if we can look at it with some flexibility.
That's correct. And you know, when we look at these things, we're a lot of times you just think that we're just looking at them perhaps in building terms. You know, can we fit the building on that site so that we've got enough? But we also have to think, right, as Councilor Nolan was talking about, you know, well, how do we get in and out of the site? And, you know, where would we park cars? And what's the proximity and the grade relative to the buildings and the accessibility of that? So those are the types of issues that we're working through right now to understand whether or not that makes sense to consider those parcels further.
Good. Glad to hear that. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Councilor. Any other councilor questions? Very good. We greatly appreciate your coming, Brad and Michelle. And we look forward to updates as we go along, and just remind the council that the school committee is available for our discussion with them as things go along. So, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Have a nice evening.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, next order of business.
Next order of business is the confirmation of new appointments.
Observation of new appointments, Councilor LeBlanc.
Thank you. We have a couple new appointments this evening. The first, Ordinance Administration voted unanimously to recommend that the City Council appoint Susan Roberts-Wright to the Archives Committee, term to expire 2/14/22, and I so move.
Second.
Let's see, Susan, are you here? There she is. How are you? Thank you for coming tonight.
Moved and seconded. Any questions or comments from councilors? Thank you for agreeing to serve. Simple majority. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you very much, Susan.
Next is Ordinance Administration voted unanimously to recommend that the City Council appoint Lois Hamilton to the Archives Committee, term to expire 2/14/22, and I so move.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Lois is standing. Thank
How
you,
are you,
Lois.
Lois? Thank you.
Thank you for coming. Thank you for agreeing to serve. It's a simple majority. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
And they also told us if we wanted to go over to the archives room, they'd be happy to give us a show around there. Which
Great.
I think it'd be cool. The next, we have Ordinance and Administration voted unanimously to recommend that the City Council appoint Sandy Williams to the Archives Committee, term to expire 2/14/22, and I so move.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Sandy, thank you very much for agreeing to serve. Councilors, any questions? Simple majority. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Thank you, all three of you.
And we have one more. Ordinance Administration voted unanimously to recommend that the City Council appoint Francina Monel Samard to the Shellfish Advisory Committee, term to expire 2/14/22, and I so move.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Welcome, Francine. Thank you for agreeing to serve. Any questions, comments? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Thanks for agreeing. Okay. Councilor Blank, great work. Madam Clerk, next order of business.
Next order of business is the consent agenda and the unanimous consent calendar.
Okay, first, the consent agenda. Anyone wish to remove anything from the consent agenda? I'm going to remove item number 1 of the confirmation of reappointments. Anybody else? Other than that, all those in favor of we'll need a motion. Motion to approve and seconded. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you. With item number 1, downtown development, I just wanted to point out to Ordinance and Administration and to the administration item from the Charter, Section 2-10, Appointment to City Offices. 210B says, no unelected appointee shall be appointed to more than one multiple member body unless said board or commission is interrelated. And I just wanted to notice the fact that, and I have great respect for the service that Mr. Whitmarsh gives to the city, he also is a member of the Historic Commission. So when you are deliberating that, you guys need to take that into account and decide how we handle that, because the charter is quite explicit. So with that note, I'll accept a motion to accept that part of the consent agenda. Second? Second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Thank you. Now the unanimous consent agenda. There are 2 items on the unanimous consent calendar. Number 1 is an update of the City of Gloucester Beach Parking and Traffic Ad Hoc Committee. And the second is the establishment of an ad hoc advisory committee to study the assisted living residents at Gloucester Crossing. Those will be referred out to committees. I just wanted to just note what they are, and if councilors had any questions, otherwise we'll just have a motion and a second, and we'll refer them to committee.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Madam Clerk, next order of business.
Next order of business is the Budget and Finance Standing Committee report of March 21st.
Councilor Cox.
Let's see. I have two matters from the Mass Department of Safety that are annual grants for that Fire Captain Barbagallo writes and obtains for the valuable grant-funded outreach programs for the most vulnerable in the community, and that's seniors and children. So I'm going to go ahead and make the first motion. The Budget and Finance Committee voted 3 in favor, 0 opposed, to accept a SAFE grant in the amount of $4,354 for the purpose of providing fire and life safety education to school-aged children, and I so move.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Councilor Cox.
It's an annual grant. This one is to educate school-aged children on fire and life safety.
Great. Any questions or comments? Simple majority. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Next.
The second motion, Budget and Finance Committee voted 3 in favor, 0 opposed, to accept a SAFE grant in the amount of $2,600 for the purpose of funding or providing fire and life safety education to seniors, and I so move.
Second.
Moved and seconded.
Same thing.
Same thing? Okay. Any other comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Budget and Finance voted 3 in favor, 0 opposed, to accept a fiscal year 2019 earmark grant in the amount of $75,000 for the purpose of upgrading the police department's communication infrastructure through the purchase of new public safety radio equipment, and I so move.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Self-explanatory.
Yeah, every year the city sends its state legislators a wish list on their state budget, and one of the items that we asked for was for the police department for new radios and upgrades to radios in the amount of $75,000, and they very nicely funded that.
Sweet. Okay. Any other comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Budget and Finance voted 3 in favor, 0 opposed, to accept cash donation from Barbara Berman in the amount of $75 from the Christopher J. McCarthy and from Christopher J. McCarthy in the amount of $100 for the purpose of funding the Gloucester Archives Committee donation projects. And I so move.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Nice gesture. Thank you. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you.
Sorry. The Budget and Finance Committee voted 3 in favor to request the City Council state legislators file a home rule petition on behalf of the city that the General Court approve and enact a special act substantially as follows. Section 1, the General Court may make clerical or editorial changes of any form to the bill unless the City Council approve amendments to the bill before enactment by the General Court. The City Council is hereby authorized to approve amendments that shall be within the scope of the general public objectives of this petition. Section 2, notwithstanding any general or special law to the contrary, the City of Gloucester may, upon approval by the City Council and Mayor, credit the total proceeds from the sale of the former Fuller School property to a stabilization fund to be used for municipal purposes, and I so move.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Would you enlighten us on that?
So a home rule petition is necessary in order to put the money in a stabilization account. Generally, it would go to the general fund, but in this case, we want to put it in the stabilization fund. And if anybody has any further questions, our CFO, John Dunn, is here to answer them.
Anybody?
Or he's leaving. I'm not sure.
No,
which
he's
is
coming,
right.
and we'd love to hear from, we always love to hear from Mr. Dunn because he always makes it so clear for us. John, go ahead.
I missed my chance. I could have left 5 minutes ago. but thank you. No, so essentially, state statute tells us what we can do with proceeds from the sale of municipally owned real estate. What we're trying to do here is give the city a bit more flexibility, and probably more importantly, is something that you don't necessarily see, but it's going to be the presentation of the proceeds of the $4 million, $4.1 million, as it appears on our balance sheet at the end of the fiscal year. So in this case, what we're asking to do is to put it in a stabilization fund, which means it will appear in general fund balance, which will make us appear, and we will appear, and we are going to be, more financially viable. Moody's, Standard & Poor's, other people looking at our balance sheet and financial statements will appreciate that. Otherwise, it will be kind of put aside. We can essentially get to it for the same reasons, but this is a bit more flexible. Again, the appearance on our balance sheet is going to be more favorable, and we recommend this action.
Thank you. Any questions for John? Okay. So any request for a home rule petition from the council requires a roll call vote. So we will call the roll. Madam Clerk?
Councilor O'Hara?
Yes.
Councilor Cox?
Yes.
Councilor Gilman?
Yes.
Councilor Heck?
Yes.
Councilor Holgram?
Yes.
Councilor Blank?
Yes.
Councilor Lundberg?
Yes.
Councilor Memhard?
Yes.
Councilor Nolan?
Yes.
The motion to request the city legislatures to file a home rule petition for the purpose specified passes on a vote of 9 in favor, 0 opposed.
Excellent. Councilor Cox, another one.
Budget and Finance voted unanimously. Sugar. That's why I don't usually turn it off. Budget and Finance voted unanimously to approve SA 31 in the amount of $35,000 from the Building Maintenance Stabilization Fund to school pre-K and administration relocation study for the purpose of funding a feasibility study for the relocation of the school pre-K and administrative offices, and I so move.
Second.
Moved and seconded. A narrative for us?
The $35,000 appropriation from the Building Stabilization Fund is for further investigation as to the best location for the school pre-K program and school department offices for either the high school or O'Malley Innovation Middle School, and associated costs for renovation of the space, or if the option to buy the current lease building is a better option. There are 2 more years left on the lease of the building that's now being used at Blackburn, and now is the appropriate time to look and see what our options are for the future.
Thank you. Any councilor questions on this? Very good. So this also requires a roll call vote, but I would like to commend Budget and Finance and Councilor Cox for getting out ahead of this, so we're not in the situation that we were last time around, and this is really good. Madam Clerk, I think it's a roll call.
Yes. Councilor O'Hara?
Yes.
Councilor Cox? Yes. Councilor Gilman?
Yes.
Councilor Heck?
Yes.
Councilor Holgram?
Yes.
Councilor Blank? Yes. Councilor Lundberg?
Yes.
Councilor Memhard?
Yes.
Councilor Nolan?
Yes.
City Council motion to approve supplemental appropriation 2019 SA 31 in the amount of $35,000 passes on a vote of 9 in favor, 0 opposed.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Councilor Cox. Next order of business, Madam Clerk.
Next order of business is the Ordinance and Administration Standing Committee report of March 18th.
Councilor LeBlanc.
Thank you. We have 2 items this evening. The first item, Ordinance Administration voted unanimously to recommend that the City Council approve the application of James Santapaula and Andrew Santapaula to construct and maintain a weir, pound net, or fish trap in the tidal waters within the city limits of Gloucester, and I so move.
Second.
So this has been vetted extensively. It went to O&A and to the Harbor Master and the Waterways Board, and then it went to the Fisheries Commission, and then we vetted it at O&A the other day. Jimmy was there with his son. He explained to us where it was going to be and what it was going to be. He called me this evening before I showed up here, saying that they just got in from fishing and he wasn't able to make it this evening. I told him it wouldn't be a problem because it went through 3 different committees before it came to council. He's been doing it, his family's been doing it for a long time. It's nothing new to the city. And he'd like to start doing this in May when so basically it's a fish trap for bait fish, is what it is. So mackerel, pogies, herring, whatever comes into the harbor. So it's pretty cool.
Any councilor questions about this? Councilor Gilman?
So I did, I did sit in an O&A, and it was a fascinating discussion. It's going to be 700 feet long? Is that about as long as this building? I mean, what, can you give me a
That's
feeling?
about typical. It's about 600,
Okay. So 2 football fields or so.
about that.
Okay.
It's marked extensively, so it'll be, it's not, it'll be marked with buoys, so people will be able to see it. You'll be able to go over it, but you won't be able to fish through it. So that's the only thing. Where he's going to put it, there was one there previously.
Okay.
Yes.
And where in the harbor is it? You guys were using some names, and I wasn't
It's,
familiar.
if you guys are familiar with Eastern Point, where Joe Garland used to live, it'd be right off Black Bess, exactly. So it's a little rock pile between 10 Pound Island and the breakwater, off to the shore. Not that far off the shore.
Other council questions? Great. This is just a simple majority. So all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you very much. Next one.
Ordinance Administration voted unanimously to recommend that the City Council permit the withdrawal of Council Order 2019-010 to amend Gloucester Code of Ordinances, Chapter 21, Streets, Sidewalks, and Other Public Places by deleting Section 21-19, removal of snow from sidewalks, and Section 21-20, removal of covering ice on sidewalks without prejudice, and I so move.
Second.
Want to explain?
I think it's pretty straightforward. We had a discussion at O&A. We didn't think it was it was more of just bringing it up with the administration.
Okay.
And it was kind
Got
of
it.
negatively sought, and we, instead of putting a motion through, the councilor decided to withdraw it.
Excellent. Okay. Understood. Any other questions? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Madam Clerk, next order of business.
Next order of business is the Plan and Development Standing Committee report of March 20th.
There are no matters from this meeting for council consideration.
It's a lucky thing for us and for you. Thank you, Councilor Gilman. Madam Clerk, next order of business.
Next order of business is Public Hearing 2019-014 to Loan Order 2019-001, loan authorization request in the amount of $900,000 for the demolition and reconstruction of the Magnolia Pier.
So I'll open the public hearing, but before we call for those to speak in favor, Councilor Nolan, do you want to say anything to introduce this, or shall we just go right ahead? So this is a public hearing. We will ask first for those who wish to speak in favor of this, and I see Mr. Destino approaching. So, Mr. Destino.
Thank you, Mr. President. And while I'm here to advocate for this loan authorization to rebuild Magnolia Pier and to answer any questions on the project you may have, I'm really here to just say thank you to especially Councilor Nolan, who's been instrumental in leading the charge here and getting this pier rebuilt, to the committee, Ted Coster and Lisa Nagello and Dick Wilson, who served on that group, as well as Sean and another member, I think, of the city staff, and mainly to the people of Magnolia that's made a commitment and rallied around and helped us get this done. May not have been as fast as it, but I think we have a really good plan. It made us look at maybe some other aspects like the the kayaks on the beaches and the moorings in the harbor over there. Talking to Manchester, it strengthened that bond. This is a really good city project. We're happy to be behind it, and I can't thank the people who were involved enough. This is really a great thing for the city. We're happy to get this done, and let's move it forward. And again, I'll be here to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. We have quite a few interested people here, and so if this is the part where we say anybody else wishing to speak in favor can come and speak for 3 minutes, and we're happy to hear any and all of you if you'd like to speak. So if anybody would like to speak in favor, please come forward, name and address for the record.
We should do a show of hands, too.
We will, yeah.
For the record, members of the council, my name is Mark Nestor. I'm an attorney at 45 Middle Street, Gloucester, Massachusetts, and I'm a proud resident of the Village of Magnolia, 15 Long Hill Road, Gloucester, Massachusetts. I'm probably considered a carpetbagger because I've only been here about 26 years, so I'm not sure if I have the right to stand up and advocate on behalf of the Village of Magnolia. But this has been a great village to raise my children. And quite truthfully, the Magnolia Pier has been a magnet for all children and a lot of parents for the entire time I've been here and since before. It's a safe, it's a friendly domain. It interacts between the children of Manchester and the children of Magnolia. And this is not just a village project. This is a project that benefits the entire city. We have residents from all over the city that come to enjoy it. Both the scenic views along Shore Road, you may remember from the no-name blizzard of Edward White's house that used to be on right next to the pier, which is now floating in the Atlantic Ocean, probably down to Florida by now. And the pictures that were shown of the pier last year, it was battered by hurricanes, which broke the hearts of most people in Magnolia. It's an outstanding project, and again, as Mr. DeCino said, it showed how the citizens of Magnolia come together. This has always been a very core group that supports each other, and I think Magnolia and the city of Gloucester deserves to have a new pier in. One example I can give, which is somewhat old, about how the village of Magnolia pulls together. Some of you may remember the disastrous fire of the Ocean Avenue condominiums about 20 years ago, where approximately 40 different units were burned to the ground within the space of about 3 hours. The Village of Magnolia residents themselves, before anybody from the Red Cross or any other organization got there, banded together, collected money, collected clothing, made sure that everybody that was burned out had a place to stay within 4 hours, and pulled together the resources so we could give these victims some money to buy even basic clothes, because they had nothing. They were burned out quickly. And this is the kind of spirit that has been imbued in Magnolia probably since before I was there. And I would strongly request that this city council favorably grant this application so that we can have this pier built, and my children and potentially my grandchildren will have it the luxury of being able to enjoy the pier as everybody else has. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark. Anyone else to speak in favor? And if you don't have to speak, if you don't, we will do a show of hands when we're all done with this, so your record will be noted for the record. Yes, sir.
Good evening. My name is Doug Shatford.
Hello, Doug.
22 Flume Road, Magnolia. I just wanted to thank the administration for hearing us and rallying together and getting this thing going and hopefully approving this tonight. I especially wanted to thank Councilor Nolan for his hard work and that council. And go Magnolia.
Hey, Doug.
Thank you, Doug.
I wanted to see your shirt, Doug.
Thank you. Well done. Anyone else to speak in favor? If not, can we... Oh, come ahead. Just a name and address for the record, please.
Yeah. I'm Colby Dewine. I live on 13 Oaks Avenue. just want to say that, like, the pier, it really isn't just a pier. I moved to Magnolia about around 2 years ago, and the pier gave me an opportunity to develop some friendships that I'll probably never have the chance to develop again. I'm actually friends with Doug's son. He's one of my best friends. I love the kid to death, and because the pier was there at the time, it gave me that chance to kind of develop that friendship with him. I guess everybody's going to say this if they come up here, but the pier really isn't just a pier. It's kind of a chance to hang out, have a fun time, develop, like I said, develop some friendships, family. It is really important to the people in Magnolia, and most likely not just the people in Magnolia, but the people in Gloucester itself too, all throughout the city. So I just want to thank you guys for considering this and listening to what I had to say tonight. So thank you.
Good job.
Thank you for speaking. Yes, name and address for the record, please.
Leslie Bolia, 10 Emily Lane, Magnolia, Massachusetts. I don't know if I'm speaking loud enough. Yes? I actually didn't really plan on speaking or prepare anything, but just sitting here listening to people, I just need to tell you the story of my kids who grew up in Magnolia. So when it came time to write the college essay, which as you all know is important, my kids started talking about how they were on the soccer team and wanted to be the captain, and I said, they don't want to read that. Think of something really meaningful to you. And my eldest wrote an amazing essay about the pier and how important it is to her and her community and her growing up. And it started out as I was gazing down into the stars. And it was about this amazing night when she literally dragged me out of bed to come down, running, get down, you have to come to the pier, you have to see this. I was fast asleep. I thought she was crazy. And I went down to the pier with her, and there in the water were these sparkling, luminescent diatoms, plankton, you've heard of them. And she wrote this amazing essay. I still have my skin shivering to think about it. So when the next one came along, her sister, she started writing about how she wanted to be on the soccer team and didn't make captain. And I said, throw that out. Write about something really meaningful to you. And she wrote about the pier and how important it was to her and her community. And I just felt like these stories, you have no idea. It's Villanova University in Pennsylvania. They're hearing about the pier in Magnolia. So I just wanted to thank you all. It's a really meaningful thing to all of us and my kids. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Anyone else wish to speak in favor? If not, can we have a show of hands of you who came tonight who are in favor of this? Keep them up so Dana can take a count.
What's the matter, Amit? You don't support the pier, buddy? Yeah.
Hold your fire, counselors. We'll get to us. Okay, great. Anyone wishing to speak in opposition? Seeing none. Any communications?
There are none.
Any counselor questions as to the technicality of the proposal? Counselor Hecht?
Mrs. Stino, I'm not sure that you'd like to address, but you were talking about some really interesting design features that you're contemplating. Is it appropriate to, just for the audience to kind of bounce around things you're thinking about, or is that inappropriate?
I can tell you about the process a little bit, but basically the end game was the design is exactly like the pier was before. We had extensive conversations with Manchester about the moorings in the harbor there. We were trying to find other ways to help fund not only the debt service, but the maintenance on the pier going forward. And we came up with a couple ideas. You'll see new kayak racks at the Magnolia beach there as well, at the pier. Those kayaks are mainly used to access the moorings for the recreational boats out in in that Manchester Harbor there. We've been in discussions with the town of Manchester to try and find a way for us to receive some revenue and take over that, the operations of that. And to be honest with you, that little harbor has potential to have a lot more moorings, but because it's very unprotected, it's hard for folks to. If it had a larger dinghy dock on the end of the pier, I think more people would take moorings in that harbor and would generate more revenue. So we had multiple meetings and discussions about how best to try to, accommodate people who need to get to their moorings safely. So we went through a couple of different designs with a larger dinghy dock, and because of the the way the harbor faces and the ocean coming in during storms, we couldn't protect that dinghy dock enough without really exaggerating the cost of this project. So we went back to the design of 1930s that has lasted for a long time, obviously, and so we're building basically the replica of what was there, just a stronger and sturdier. Yeah.
Thank you, Jim.
Okay.
Councillor Gilman, any questions?
I have a question for Mr. Justino. Thank you. So you mentioned the word maintenance. So can you just give us an understanding of how we would do preventative maintenance on this, assuming the council possibly will support this? Like, what would your thoughts be on?
And the guys from Magnolia as they've been doing for the last 25 years over there, I guess. No, I mean, obviously this is a city asset. It'll be under the city umbrella, and the city will take care of it like they do any asset. If there's something happens, we'll get a repair order and fix it. But like anything else, things are brand new like this. Let's hope that everybody takes care of it and treats it correctly, and we don't have any problems with it for a long time. The pier itself doesn't really require a lot of maintenance. So.
Thank you.
Other questions? Councillor Memhard and Councillor Cox.
Just while we're on the subject of maintenance, I know that GZA did an extensive engineering review for us for the reconstruction, and you were able to explore a range of possible materials that were both cost-effective and maybe more longevity or better suited to this, and you had to get some conservation or environmental permissions, but I think we jumped through a lot of hurdles and hoops to get there.
We really did, yeah, and the Concom and it was worked with us very well, letting us use a different type of material which would be long-lasting and, quite frankly, less expensive. In that area, there's not a lot of eelgrass, which usually causes, the problems, when it comes to, taking up the pilings and installing new ones. So the permitting process went fairly smooth, and they did, the Concom did a great job. Yep.
Thank you. Councillor Cox.
How many moorings does Gloucester have in that harbor?
Gloucester doesn't have any moorings in that harbor. Oh, I mean, are there Gloucester people in there? I mean, they're all Manchester moorings.
Right.
Right.
Is Manchester contributing to the rebuild of the pier at all?
No. Again, we're going to sign an agreement that, the kayaks shouldn't be on the beach when they access the moorings anyway. What happens is, a storm comes in and takes those kayaks out. The next thing you know, the harbor masters are out there trying to rescue these kayaks that are out in the, floating out, to sea. So, they've entered into an agreement with us to make sure that those kayaks get stored properly, and we're putting those kayak racks up, which is going to generate some revenue. That helps. We are still trying to make a decision, and it's really, at this point, the city of Gloucester's decision, because I think Manchester would love to get the operation of that little harbor off their books. There are a number of problems. I mean, Gloucester charges $8 a square foot for a mooring. In Manchester Harbor there, they charge, Magnolia Harbor, they charge $12 a square foot. And, you know, by ordinance, the Waterways Board cannot charge different prices. So we worked through something. I mean, they actually have a $4 dredging surcharge on top of their mooring fees. So, you know, we came up with the idea, why don't you just, you know, take over the billing. You still bill anything, and we'll put a memorandum of understanding between the two communities, like we did with Veterans Center, with, like, you know, we do with a lot of when we regionalize, and they could just pay us the $8. I think that option is still on the table if we wanted it, but we're not sure it makes that much sense to the city to put, without having more moorings there, and to send our guys that far out. To, you know, when, you know, it may not make monetary sense for us to take over the operations, certainly not the administrative side of it, but just the operations of getting out there to patrol that area every day when Manchester's right there, and it just, you know, without the revenue that it would, you know, we think it could generate if they really, because you could probably fit 100 moorings in that little harbor if you know, if you could space them correctly, but you know, you just wouldn't. You know, they have empty moorings now, and you know, the people aren't renting, and there's a reason why they're not renting them, and it's you know, because they can't really access them safely. So,
What about CPA grant? Have we thought about applying to Manchester through CPA for some remediation on the loan?
you mean Manchester applying for a CPA grant through Manchester, or Gloucester through Gloucester?
Well, with Manchester CPA money, so Manchester.
That did not come up as an option. I don't know if it would be eligible for a CPA. Maybe it would be. I mean, I guess it would be considered a park or recreation area. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, I didn't bring that up to Manchester. Obviously, that would be their decision whether or not they spend how they spend their CPA money. They've been good to work with. We've been trying to find different scenarios on how to do this, but they're more concerned about trying to get out from under the operations of the mooring field.
Right. But they use the pier to access their moorings through their dinghies, correct?
They do.
So I think...
Well, if they're on the dinghy dock, Gloucester gets the rentals from the dinghy dock.
Right.
That's Gloucester's property. Most people access their moorings from the kayaks.
Okay. All right. I would be interested in helping write a CPA grant for that, because I think it is an eligible purpose based on my knowledge of CPA.
Well, Mr. Fitterspiel and I speak almost every week. I'll bring it up next time.
Thank you.
Other councilor questions? And we'll close the public hearing and call for the committee report. Councilor Cox.
Budget and Finance voted 3 in favor, 0 opposed, to approve a loan authorization of $900,000 to pay the costs of demolition of the existing and reconstruction of a new Magnolia Pier, and I so move.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Councilors, any comments or questions, statements? Councilor LeBlanc, you want to start? You didn't speak. Oh, Councilor Cox, I'm sorry, we'll go first.
I really want to send out my appreciation to everybody that was at the fundraiser, that has contributed private funds to this, and especially to Councilor Nolan for working through the red tape side of everything for everybody to be able to donate money to this. And Alana and the committee and everybody that donated to that special event, it really is an amazing feat to pull together that much money in such a short amount of time. So thank you.
Councilor LeBlanc.
Thank you. Councilor Nolan, awesome job. Thank you, everybody, for being here tonight. I'm going to support this. I think it's a great community or village, or however you want to call it, asset over there. But I want to thank Doug the most because last time your brother got up here and he told us what he does once a year off there. So thank you for not having him come up here and explaining what he does again. But thank you, everybody.
So we'll just go right down the line. Councilor Hick, do you want to say anything?
I just want to say, I live downtown, I don't live in Magnolia, but the passion that has come through is really impressive. And it's a village over there, and you guys, I'm going to support this, and it's great for Gloucester. So thank you for your passion.
Councilor Gilman.
Yeah, I was astounded attending the fundraiser at the B&B, it's a Manchester Beach and Tennis Club, Bath and Tennis Club, sorry. I just thought it was so much fun. It was just, I knew so many people there that I never knew from Ward 5. And then when Sean was good enough to get behind the bar at the Cape Ann Brewing Company, and then the place was packed once again with people supporting and you know, getting dinners and having a beer or two, and the spirit that I see here is just awesome. I was just totally. It was Colby. It was great that you came up and shared your story, and Leslie and Doug and Mark and everyone that's here. I noticed Adam Philpott in the back, and you know, there's just so many generations here. It's just really great, and you know, Councilor Nolan, you've done a really great job. So thank you all. This is great. I'll be supporting this. Thanks.
Councilor O'Hara.
Thank you. Just to make it clear, I'll be supporting this, but I also want to. I take great offense that this pier, the present pier that's out there, was deemed unsafe. And I'll say, and people, Councilor Val Gilman's just telling me, shh. And I want to say that personally, because myself and the Commodore of Magnolia Harbor, Doug Shafted, we spent, along with Norman Neves and others, we spent hundreds of hours putting cross braces on that pier. And you know, I can tell you my hands, our tools, Sean Nolan's tools that got dropped in Magnolia Harbor, they're still there. Sorry about that, Sean. Again, the remains of the cross braces that were to be put in, as Mr. Destino mentioned, maintaining that pier, are on the left side of the Magnolia Fire Station. So if anyone wants to be witness, they're 4-inch by 12-inch by, I don't know what they are, 18 feet. They weigh a ton. We manhandled those. We took care of that pier, you know, kids jumping off the pier, Colby and friends and past generations jumping off the pier, taking off the handrails. Doug knows about this. Well, you know, they'd take them off. We'd go back and put them back on. We'd find other ways to try to keep the handrails, but it doesn't slight me in the least that we're getting a new pier, because that will take a lot of relief off of me and the Commodore and all the others that volunteered so much time to keep that pier going. Because it's a pier, yes, Magnolia uses it, but as has been said, Manchester and everyone in Gloucester, I mean, East Gloucester, Lanesville, everyone's over there. It's not strictly for Magnolia people, but it's truly a special structure that people just enjoy, and it's enjoyed 12 months a year. It's a valuable asset to the entire city of Gloucester. So I thank the administration, Councilor Nolan, everyone who was supportive of this and standing behind. Obviously, this took a long time to put through. They expedited the process. Mr. Destino and the administration did a tremendous job, Mike Hale, of moving it along, and they're going to continue to move it along. Obviously, before too long, the new pier will be there for everyone to enjoy. So I just want to thank everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Holmgren.
I am so happy to support this tonight. I have been waiting a long time to cast this vote. Thank you, Councilor Nolan. Thank you, councilors. Thank you, To the volunteers who have helped to make this possible tonight, I am very proud to be in Ward 5, although I'm not technically in Magnolia. We hang out there quite a lot, and I'm very, very proud to be saying aye to this. Thank you.
Councilor Memhard.
I just have to say that 9 months ago, I felt a little guilty because the city and the DPW stepped right up to the Good Harbor Beach footbridge reconstruction, and they left the Magnolia Pier out there. And I'm glad that we're finally catching up because it's well-deserved and appropriate. The conversation this evening just helps remind me about what makes Gloucester as a community overall, not just Magnolia and the Magnolia Village and the Magnolia Pier, but Gloucester. We're just so blessed with the unique geographic assets that we have here, so that we have Lanes Cove, we have the quarries, we have our beaches, we have Dogtown, we have the Magnolia Pier. But as a community, that builds our character and our spirit in so many different ways, and we're so lucky. And it's appropriate that we work together to take good care of them.
And I'll go next, and I'll let Sean go last. I just wanted to say I'm going to be supporting this. This is a tremendous example of the public-private partnership that we all talk about in our city, but more importantly, just the sense of community and how everyone knew what their role was to get this done, and with the fundraising and the community spirit. And we want to thank the Magnolia Pier Advisory Committee for their work on this too, and I'll be supporting it. And we'll wrap up with Councilor Nolan.
I will be supporting this tonight, and I want to thank everybody for thanking me, but the real people to thank are the residents and the administration for working with us. There was a lot of ups and downs in how this would be going. If it wasn't for the turnout of the people in support of the pier, with letters and you know, showing support for trying to get something done, it may not have been visited as quickly as it has been. One of my most pleasurable moments in my life was the night of the party at the Bath and Tennis Club, seeing everybody come together, generations from generations, seeing friends that I haven't seen for years that moved out of town that still came back, or worked with something to donate over online, or getting together with it. And the will of the people is unbelievable in all of the city. There's a lot of good projects that happen, but this one, quite frankly, is very special to me, and I want to thank everybody for making this happen, and the administration and the city council. And I want to thank you all very much.
Thank you, Councilor. So with that, Madam Clerk, I believe it's a roll call vote. Yeah, we have a motion in a second.
All right. Councilor O'Hara?
Yes.
Councilor Cox?
Yes.
Councilor Gilman?
Yes.
Councilor Heck?
Yes.
Councilor Holborn?
Yes.
Councilor LeBlanc? Yep. Councilor Lundberg?
Yes.
Councilor Memhard?
Yes.
Councilor Nolan?
Yes.
The City Council motion for the loan order in the amount of $900,000 for the Magnolia Pier passes on a vote of 9 in favor, 0 opposed.
Congratulations. Very good. Well, we earned our pay tonight, guys. So we'll go back to our routine business after that excitement. Madam Clerk, next order of business.
Next order of business is for council vote, the decision to adopt Special City Council Permit 2018-005, Gloucester Crossing Road Number 1 and Number 7, map 262, lots 3 and 37, for a retail drive-through pursuant to Gloucester zoning ordinance section 1.5.3G, drive-through facilities, in section 5.17, special regulations drive-through facilities in the EB district.
So, Councilor Gilman, will you move all three of these special permit decisions?
Thank you, Councilor. I move that Council adopts the decision, Special Council Permit 2018-005.
Second.
Moved and seconded. This is roll call vote, please.
Councilor O'Hara?
Yes.
Councilor Cox?
Yes.
Councilor Gilman?
Yes.
Counselor Heck?
Yes.
Counselor Holgram?
Yes.
Counselor Blank?
Yes.
Counselor Lumberg?
Yes.
Counselor Memhard?
Yes.
Counselor Nolan?
Yes.
The motion to adopt Special City Council Permit 2018-005 passes on a vote of 9 in favor, 0 opposed.
Thank you, Counselor Gilman. Next one.
I move that the City Council adopts the decision Special Council Permit 2018-006.
She's so excited about the Magnolia Pier. She's still thinking about the pier. Moved and seconded. Roll call vote.
Counselor O'Hara?
Yes.
Counselor Cox? Yes. Counselor Gilman?
Yes.
Counselor Heck?
Yes.
Counselor Holgram?
Yes.
Counselor Blank? Counselor Lumberg?
Yes.
Counselor Memhard? Yes. Counselor Nolan?
Yes.
The City Council motion to adopt Special City Council Permit 2018-006 passes on a vote of 9 in favor, 0 opposed.
Thank you. Last one, Counselor Gilman.
I move that the City Council adopts the decision Special Council Permit 2018-007.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Final roll call vote.
Counselor O'Hara?
Yes.
Counselor Cox? Yes. Counselor Gilman?
Yes.
Counselor Heck?
Yes.
Counselor Holgram? Yes. Counselor Blank?
Yes.
Counselor Lumberg?
Yes.
Counselor Memhard?
Yes.
Counselor Nolan?
Yes.
The motion to adopt Special City Council Permit 2018-007 passes on a vote of 9 in favor, 0 opposed.
So thank you. Before we move on to the next order of business, I just wanted to point out to councilors from the unanimous consent agenda, one of the items, the one that I put forward was to establish an ad hoc committee to look at the assisted living residents that was part of the original proposal. And we talked a little bit about that when we had all of this, the hearings on this. So we will go forward with that ad hoc committee. It'll be through P&D, and we'll get a status on the what has been done by Sam Park and Company on assisted living and what's the potential future for that, and report back to the City Council. That was what the order said. So we'll keep everybody advised, but we promised everyone we'd do that, and we're going to do it. So, okay, Madam Clerk, next order of business.
Next order of business is the update of the Stagefort Park Advisory Committee and the Magnolia Woods Oversight and Advisory Committee by Council Representative Councilor Sean Nolan.
Councilor Nolan?
There's a lot going on, so I'll try to keep this down to a half hour or less. 5 minutes. On the Stage 4 Park Advisory Committee, there's been some updates on the restoration of the cannons, some acceptance of different materials to be had for use of that renovation project, which looks to be going forward, as well as you've heard some of the things that we've talked about with grants and how we had to turn some grants in for some of the renovations and the landscaping that we're doing there. The DPW has been working on a project down by the tennis courts for redoing the landscape, removing a lot of the dead trees. If you drive by there, you'll see that they're doing an excellent job. And this is in preparation for the Avis Murray tennis courts to make sure that this all fills in with the beautiful idea of the tennis courts and the landscape of the whole project. Things are going well with Stage 4. There's always a need for grant writers in the city and ways to find money to help plan and, well, not plan, but to execute the plans that they actually do, which they have a great amount of ideas for. On the Magnolia Woods Committee, it's pretty much still in the same situation where it was been last time reported. We've been trying to get a second gate added for winter access and parking. It would have been great if we could have had it this winter. It's one of those winters that there was so much outdoor activities and not a lot of snow, but there was really no parking to enjoy it. So we're hoping that that's going to go through around of April, so next year will be open for it. There's some looking into some matters of drainage and different membrane things that Councilor Harrod had brought up that they're looking at, and they're moving steps closer and closer to close the project off as a finished project, where at that point we can file for some more grants possibly and do different things. But other than that, everything's moving forward, and just like any other committee in the city of Gloucester, they need money. And it's going to be tough to find, but these are two great committees, and I want to thank them for all their work.
Thank you, Councilor Nolan. Madam Clerk, next and final order of business.
Councilor, request to the mayor.
Start with Councilor Holmgren this time.
I have two things to say. First of all, happy birthday, Council President Lundberg.
Thank you. Well, that is awesome. And I will say, today I got a cupcake from my two grandchildren, both of whom left our house in tears. So it's nice to have this cupcake without the tears. So thank you very much. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. So, Councilor Holmgren.
And the second thing is that 2019 marks the North Shore Health Project's 30th anniversary. And yes, very, very exciting. So it's celebrating all year. And on Monday, May 13th, you all should have gotten this email. The Health Project is honoring Governor Baker as its 10th annual community health activist. And that is going to be at 6 p.m. at the Beauport Hotel. If you are interested in buying tickets, visit the North Shore Health Project website. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilor Memhard.
I'm sure it's also in honor of Council President Lundberg's birthday, but we did get word that a couple of fluffy little birds arrived on Good Harbor Beach earlier today, and that's very exciting that the piping plovers have landed. And I'd like to thank the mayor's office, and I know later this afternoon we all got an email from Vanessa in the mayor's office with an update on the Plover Action Program and the recruitment of volunteers, and also an update about the program at the library on Saturday morning at 10 o'clock about plover preservation, and a really interesting educational program there. So it's upon us, which is sort of exciting, and I'm glad we were well prepared for it this year.
Thank you. Councilor Nolan?
Two things. Actually, I'm very happy for the North Shore Health Project. It's a great asset to this community, and as this one grows and thrives into what it's become, I also want to thank Reverend Rona Tinsdale for all the work she's done with the Grace Center. Unfortunately, the grant couldn't be going on forever, but the things that she's done for our community, I really appreciate it, and I want to thank her.
Absolutely. Thank you. Councilor Cox?
I'm very honored to be speaking tomorrow night, doing a segment with KPN TV on elected women in office. I'm going to be sharing the segment with Denise Donnelly from Rockport and two other people from neighboring towns that I cannot remember their names. But look forward to that coming out in the next couple weeks on KPN TV.
Great. Councilor LeBlanc?
Thank you. I would like to put a request to the mayor to install a sidewalk on Angle Street on the southerly side for former Councilor Orlando. We'll call it the Orlando
Compound?
Yes, more. Yeah, but he is right. You step out of his front door and you're literally on the street. There's no buffer or anything like that. I know we've reached out to the DPW before, and it was in the plans, and then something happened. So that would be item number one. And then also pothole patrol. I know the DPW is out there doing potholes. Keep up the good work. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Hecht?
Thank you. As a request to the mayor, I would like to request security cameras at Burnham's Field. I'll also be putting that in writing. The cost is approximately $35,000, and I've talked extensively to the administration about this. The next thing is the seafood show was a great success. They had an area called Mass Ave, which had a number of distributors, seafood distributors, 3 of which were from Gloucester. About half of them were from Gloucester. And my understanding is that there were 6 large orders obtained as a result by new customers, and some were taken at the show and shipped during the show. Very impressive. So it's really come together. The governor, the lieutenant governor, Bruce Tarr, Seth Moulton, and the mayor just did all did fantastic speeches, and by far they had the largest crowd of my 3 years in attending. They had customers from China, Turkey, and other countries, so they really did a good job of getting international actual buyers to this thing. Councilor Lundberg was there, who else was there? I think Councilor Lundberg and I. Many thanks to Sal DiStefano, Joe Cahill, and the mayor's office for putting together this outstanding building event, putting this together. It's 5 years of growth and improvement, and this is by far the best one ever. Next one is I'm honored to have been asked to be on the board of Seaside Sustainability. When working with them on a number of initiatives in addition to the recently proposed plastic straw and stir ban. And a huge shout out to Eric Majors, who is the founder and executive director. Keep up the great work. Just to report back on the Lobster Trap Christmas Tree fundraiser for Art Haven. It was great success. We raised over $1,000, and Miles Schlichte won the 10 brand new lobster traps. And thanks for all who supported that effort. We're officially cranking up with the mayor's approval on the 39 wrought iron planters for Main Street. They're going to be inside the granite surrounds, and we'll be doing fundraising among all the retailers and other parties who might have an interest in brass recognition plates. So people will be able to generously donate to these things. And a thank you to the mayor who's in support of the project. Many thanks to all who attended the dog park fundraiser at our home this past Thursday night. Appreciate all the donations and the attendance. And a huge shout out to Discover Gloucester, who had their annual meeting last night. Elizabeth Carey, the director is absolutely knocking them dead. And lastly, this morning I attended the Life Sciences Symposium with the broker for GMGI in an attempt in Boston in order to help GMGI building to fill up with marine genomics-oriented life sciences tenants so that we can continue to plan for and build out the marine genomics life sciences cluster here in Gloucester, which is essential to our future, and it's right there for the taking. So it's very exciting, and if anyone would ever like to chat about it, I'd be happy to talk about growing the cluster. Thank you.
Councilor Gilman.
I've got 3 matters. The first is kind of nice that Melissa Texera and the school committee is still here, but on May 28th, we're going to reinstitute Student Government Day at Gloucester High. It's in our city charter. Jen and I took this on together. We've had a couple of very productive meetings with the superintendent and our high school principal, James Cook, Richard Francis, and Jen and myself. And what we're going to do, I think, is going to be kind of cool. We're going to do an hour and a half or 2 hours of different students at Gloucester High shadowing with people, both at City Hall. Anyone here on City Council, you want to have a partner from Gloucester High shadow you, maybe you could schedule an extra meeting or 2 with some department, and in some department or something. But anyway, so we're gonna do a shadowing and teach. The mayor's taken on a couple of roles. The city clerk's office, I'm hoping, can do a couple of students, and any of us, and whomever we can get people to sign up for. It's going to be really cool. And then at 6, we're going to have a reception here where we really want all councilors to attend with all the students that were involved. And we'll set up the League of Women Voters here, signing up people to vote, and just chat with all the students. And then they'll do a brief presentation at the beginning of our city council meeting. And we'll ask some of the students to speak for like a minute in terms of what they learned with the person that they hung out with for that. So we think it's going to be really fun, and it was really encouraging that the schools embraced it and they helped kind of figure out what would work. And then the second stage is something that we'll do at the next step, and that is they want to do a council meeting and have them be debating something that was meaningful, and then have us there to kind of be the consultants if they get stuck on Robert's rules or whatever. So that's kind of cool too. So civics is important. We're now getting back to something that's covered in the city charter, and I think it's a good time. So that's one thing I wanted to just give you all a heads up. The second thing is I wanted to let you know that in the month of May and June, we're going to be both redoing the sidewalk on Raynard Street as well as repaving the road. It's been first on the queue for repaving for a couple of years, but we were holding off because we were waiting to get the safe walking grant, and we didn't get it. Did I say it wrong? What is it? Safe sidewalk grant. So anyway, we held the meeting back in November of 2017 with Steve Winzo at O'Malley. I was a scribe. We did all this brainstorming. We got back, and the highest priority was Raynard Street sidewalk. And we didn't get the grant last year, so we held off on the paving, and that road is horrible. Sean, is close to some of your potholes in Ward 5, and Scott, some of yours in Ward 1 as well. And it's okay, all right. Well, I'm glad to hear that. Anyway, so I just wanted to let you know that that's coming. Yesterday, I went door to door with letters to describe the project, and everyone is aware. And the odd side will have a 5-foot sidewalk all the way from Hooks to Cherry Street. And there were so many people so excited that they're finally going to be able to walk baby carriages and just safely walk on that road. And they also reminded me that when you put in a 5-foot sidewalk on one side, all the cars typically just start driving slower because the road gets narrower. And so they're also excited. They said it kind of works like speed bumps as a sidewalk. So I had some really nice talks yesterday, and everyone's excited. And the third thing I wanted to mention is a request to the mayor. I request to the mayor that the Public Works Director, along with other members of city staff, including and not limited to the Conservation Agent, Planning Director, several volunteer leaders in the Dogtown Advisory Commission, and me, form a working group to address various Dogtown matters such as, number 1, developing an updated Dogtown management plan and ordinance. Number 2, reviewing relevancy of outstanding issues identified in the North Gloucester Woods Study of 2012. Number 3, recommending action plans on ways to protect and preserve Dogtown. And number 4, exploring alternative venues and sites for municipal services as well as cost implications for the city. We think that this is important. I've networked a little bit with city administration. The mayor needs to bless this, but I think it's heading in the right direction, and I'm excited about it, and I hope that this is accepted as a working group that can make some great progress and do what's right for an area that we love. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor O'Hara, anything?
Yep, thank you. I just, City Clerk Joanne Sino sent out a little article from Quincy to all of us about shoveling what they're looking at doing in the city of Quincy with the high school kids to help alleviate seniors, because they're getting the same calls, the city councilors are getting the same calls that we get. So hopefully we can come up with something that will help the seniors. Today I sat in for Councilor Nolan on Strawberry Cove, and the neighbors met, three neighbors met with Mike Hill